Welcome, folks, to another dive into the messy, beautiful, brutal arena of the human psyche. I'm your host, Michael, psychologist in training, seeker of truth, and today we're tackling conflict resolution. Now, let's get one thing straight right off the bat. Conflict isn't some polite tea party where you sip Earl Grey and nod at each other's nonsense. No. Conflict is a bloody battlefield, sometimes literal, often psychological, and it's baked into the fabric of existence. You can't escape it. Your spouse, your boss, your neighbor with the yapping dog, they're all coming for you, whether you like it or not. And here's the kicker. Most people are terrible at resolving conflict. They either run away like cowards or swing fists, verbal or otherwise, like unhinged primates. But here's the good news. Psychology has cracked some of the code. We've got data, we've got studies, and we've got millennia of human stupidity to draw from. Today, I'm going to arm you with the tools to face the chaos, not just survive it, but dominate it, because you don't learn to resolve conflict, it'll resolve you, and not in a way that you like. So sit up straight, pay attention, and let's get to work. Welcome to the show where we break down the mental health stigma, navigate sobriety with humor, and prove that it's okay to laugh while you heal. Let's get real, let's get honest, and maybe a little weird. Growth is messy, but you don't have to do it alone. This is Sober Psychology. Also, I want to go ahead and just brag real quick. If you're watching this, if you've got a little video action going on YouTube, we've got new digs. So I'm gonna try and show it off as best I can. Obviously, we got a new camera, and it kind of fades out the background. But like, if I disappear, you can kind of see. Maybe. Look at that. Wait, got to get back into focus. Anyways, I took a week off to get everything set up in this office, and because it was my spring break from school, so enjoy it, but give you some more camera angles there. Sorry for those of you who are only listening on audio, but we got an office to show off, so maybe you'll get on YouTube. I don't know. Is that incentive enough? Nah, I don't care. Whatever. Anyways, let's get back into it. So let's talk about why conflict exists. First, let's ask the big question. Why does conflict even exist? Well, here's a fun fact from evolutionary psychology. We're wired for it. Back in the Pleistocene, however you say that, if you didn't fight for your share of the mammoth meat, you starved. Period. We've talked about this before. We've been on and on about this, about how a lot of our natural instincts goes back to caveman days, goes back to the beginning of human evolution, however you want to make that argument. But a lot of what we do is survival instinct, right? So back in that period, if you didn't fight for your share of the mammoth meat, you starved. If you didn't slug it out with your rival tribe over the watering hole, your genes went kaput. So conflict isn't a glitch, it's a feature. Your brain's amygdala, which again, we've talked about, it's that little almond-shaped bastard in your skull. It lights up like a Christmas tree when someone cuts you off in traffic or your coworker steals your idea. It's screaming, threat, fight, survive. But here's where it gets interesting. A 2015 study from the Journal of Personality and Social Psychology found that humans overestimate how much others disagree with them by about 20% on average. We're paranoid little monkeys, assuming that everyone's out to get us. So half the time, the conflict in your head is bigger than the one in reality. And that's pretty hilarious, if you ask me. You're losing sleep over a war that's only half real, which is, honestly, that's classic human overreach, if you ask me. So just to expand on all of this, the biology of human conflict, it's your brain's prefrontal cortex, and that's the part that's supposed to keep you rational. It shuts down when you're pissed off. Again, going back to other episodes we've talked about, you have the amygdala, which is the alarm system for emotions, and then you have the prefrontal cortex, which is like the adult in the situation. But your prefrontal cortex, it shuts down when you're pissed off. So blood flow literally reroutes to your fists and to your mouth, which is why you say dumb things when you're in a fight. It's not you, it's your caveman wiring. And a fun fact about all of that, cortisol, which is the stress hormone, it spikes during conflict. So too much of it, and you're not just mad, you're a walking heart attack. So resolve your disputes or your body will punish you for it, period. And then you have the social roots of all of this. Humans are pack animals. We crave belonging, but we also crave dominance. And that's why you argue with your sibling over who gets the armrest. It's not about the armrest, it's about who's the top dog. Studies show that 70% of the workplace conflicts come from unclear roles. 70% of workplace conflicts come from unclear roles. You think that you're the alpha, they think that they're the alpha, and now you're both snarling over the photocopier, which is such a human thing to do. And then you also have the element of the ego trap in all of this. Here's the brutal truth. You're not fighting for justice. Half the time, you're fighting for your precious little ego. And psychologists call this the self-enhancement bias. You'd rather die on a hill of nonsense than admit that you're wrong. You ever notice how satisfying it is to be right? That's dopamine, folks, and you're a junkie for it. So just get over it. I'm over here flipping cameras way too much. I'm having too much fun with this right now. All right, so let's talk about the tools of resolution. So let's get practical. You're not here for a biology lesson. You're here to stop screwing up your relationships. Conflict resolution isn't about hugging it out or singing Kumbaya. It's about strategy, discipline, and facing the dragon head on. If you haven't listened to Jordan Peterson talk about conflict resolution, he talks about facing the dragon, the demons, basically, and it's tackling it head on. I mean, unfortunately, for those of you who are people who avoid conflict on a consistent basis, you're just going to be out. And we're going to talk about that in a second, but you have to face the dragon head on. So the first rule, stop lying to yourself. You're not fine when your partner forgets your anniversary for the third year running. You're seething. Admit it. The second rule, stop expecting the other person to read your mind. They're not telepathic. They're as dumb as you are half the time. And here's a wild stat. Couples who argue effectively, and argue effectively, are 10 times more likely to stay together than those who avoid conflict. 10 times more likely to stay together. If you are someone who can't argue effectively, that's going to cause enough strife. We're going to talk about that again here in a little bit. You're going to shut down. But if you can learn to argue effectively, if you can learn to master this conflict resolution aspect of the human psyche, you are 10 times more likely to be in a healthier relationship. And that's from a 2010 study by Gottman, who is the relationship guru. Avoiding conflict is like letting termites chew your house down. It feels peaceful until the roof caves in. Okay, so plain and simple, period. That's just how we're going to go with it. So again, going into this, first off, you're going to name the beast. Call out the conflict explicitly. Explicitly? I just said explicitly. What are we doing here? Explicitly. Call out the conflict explicitly. Say, we're fighting because you keep leaving the dishes in the sink and it makes me feel like you're made. Your vague whining gets you nowhere. Specificity cuts through the fog. Just go right to it. Another psychological fact for you is that labeling emotions reduces their intensity. There's a 2007 UCLA study that showed that naming your anger, I'm furious, calms your amygdala. Words are magic. Use them. Step 2, all of this, listen like you mean it. God dang, I cannot highlight this enough. Most people don't listen. They just wait for their turn to yell. Active listening, which is just repeating back what they said, it drops defensiveness by 40%. 40%. This is per a 2018 study. You can go look it up. So try it. When they're talking to you, you just say, okay, so you're saying that I'm a slob because I leave my socks on the floor. It sounds ridiculous, but it works. Active listening is very powerful. You ever notice how people only hear what they want? It's kind of like we're just tuned in to Ego FM 24/7. There's so much power in the active listening. I don't do a good job of this because I'm very much in attack mode when I get into an argument. But I have found that in those times where I just simply repeat back what someone said, even if it's ludicrous, if I just repeat it back, there is a chance, a really good chance, above a 40% chance, that things are going to turn out a lot better than what they would if I just kept powering through. Step 3, please own your garbage. You're not innocent, ever. A 2016 study found that people who admit fault in arguments, like, yeah, I was a jerk about that, resolve conflicts 30% faster. Swallow your pride. It's not poison. And here's the brutal truth. If you think that you're always the victim, you're delusional. You're half the problem at a minimum. So, step 4, negotiate. Don't dictate. Conflict isn't about winning. It's about not losing everything. Game theory backs this up. The best outcomes when both sides compromise just enough to keep the ship afloat. I'm going to try and say that again. The best outcomes come when both sides compromise enough to keep the ship afloat. It's not about winning and losing. Again, I'm terrible at this because I'm so competitive. I want to win at everything. I see an argument as competition. An argument with someone that you care about in a relationship, it's not about winning and losing. It's about not losing everything. You can get into an argument and it's heated enough to where you lose that person altogether. Everybody has a breaking point. Some of us have a higher threshold than others, sure. But if you care about that person, we're going to go into the active listening. We're going to learn to own our garbage. We're going to learn to negotiate and not dictate. And this is a big part of it. Okay? So you're looking to keep the ship afloat. What do we have to do to keep this thing going? You want the TV loud and they want it quiet? The solution is earbuds. Put the freaking earbuds in. Done. Stop dying on stupid hills. And then step 5, this is where we need to know when to walk away. And I think going back to what I said a little bit earlier, where you need to own your garbage and you're not the victim, there are some times where you're just with a toxic human being. And sure, you may have some fault in it, but you may be with a narcissist. You may be with someone who is an alcoholic addict. You know, I would never give the advice to just accept your fault in it to my previous relationships when I was drinking, because I'm an alcoholic. They weren't wrong. Even if they had any type of fault in any of this, they weren't wrong, because I was a monster. And that's just the reality of the situation. So going back to this step, number 5, know when to walk away. This is a big one, and this one sucks, and it hurts, and it's tough, but some conflicts are not worth it. If they're toxic, say a friend who's betrayed you 5 times, cut the cord. Research shows that 15% of relationships are irreparable due to repeated breaches of trust. Don't waste your life on a sinking ship. I feel like this is the era that I'm in my life, is getting sober and starting to live my life by those principles that I've learned day in and day out, right? Seeing people as equals and not having the ego swing struggle that I've had. I still have it, but I'm not drunk. You know, I could at least work through it. But I got to a point where I don't come crawling back. I make amends. I handle my stuff the right way. And then getting into a situation where no one really prepares you. They prepare you for what it's like to have a life of sobriety, but no one prepares you for what it's like to now be the one who's caused a lot of harm and pain and enter back into a world where you are quote unquote fixed. I use that very loosely, but you're sober now, and you're now having to deal with all the other people that you hurt, but they're also people who needed help too, in some way, shape, or form. Everybody needs, some level of therapy, some level of personal work. But I'm in this really, I don't want to say fun, because it's absolutely not, but it's a very powerful stage to be in my life, where I cut people out. If you are going to continuously lie to me, if you're going to betray me, if you're going to think that you're better than me, I don't hate you. I don't wish ill upon you. I don't have any malicious intent, but you're not in my life anymore. Period. And that's a beautiful transition because now I'm a dad. I have a child, and I'm a husband who is growing and learning how to be a healthy husband and is going to continue to do that for the rest of my life. But I have no room for people who are going to betray me. I have no room, and I had to cut the cord on a lot. Family members started out with family, and then it's progressed into realizing that there are friendships that I was hanging on to. There are some people in my life that I was hanging on to, and it was very harmful and toxic. So cutting the cord is very important. Step 5, learn to walk away. Okay. And we'll go back through that. Let me try and get back to a point where you guys can see this. So we're going to go back into this because I went through it pretty quickly. But step 1 is name the beast. We're going to talk about calling out the conflict explicitly and just saying that, hey, we're fighting because you keep doing this. This is how it makes me feel. Okay, so start calling it out, right? Same thing with like your anger. Name it. Call it out. It helps, I promise. And be specific. Don't be vague. Go right to it, right? And then number 2, listen like you mean it. Active listening is very powerful. It's very important. All right. Number 3, own your garbage. You are not innocent. Own your part of it. Stop placing the blame on your partner or your friend. You are not innocent. Negotiate. Step 4 is negotiate, don't dictate. Conflict is not about winning. It's about not losing everything. You are both on the ship and you want to figure out how to keep the ship afloat. Okay. And then number 5 is just knowing when to walk away. If it's too toxic, if they're going to continue to hurt you and lie to you and betray you, walk away. You got to do it for yourself, right? So what's the purpose behind all of this? What's the point? Is there any payoff to all of this? Is it peace? Sure, maybe. If you're into that hippie nonsense, the real payoff is power. It's power over yourself. It's when you're able to master conflict resolution, you stop being a slave to your temper, your insecurities, or that idiot in the cubicle that's next to you. You become a force. This is so powerful. When you learn how to deal with conflict resolution, you're not controlled by your anger anymore. You are a force to be reckoned with. There's an inner peace about you because you know how to progress, how to move forward. A 2019 study from Harvard Business Review found that people skilled at conflict resolution are 50% more likely to get promoted. So if you're looking for that job boost, if you're looking for that title promotion, conflict resolution is a very key way to start to progress through your career, progress through life, have better relationships and friendships. And why is this? It's because they don't waste their energy on petty wars. They channel it into results. This is going back to what happened with me, with my family. When I learned that there's no point in arguing with narcissists, there's no point in dying with these petty arguments on these little hills, I was able to move on, and I was able to move on quickly. Yeah, of course, you're cutting the cord, that step 5 that we talked about where we're deciding to move on. But there's such a peace and a calm and a growth that comes with understanding I don't have to get back at them. I don't have to fight them. I don't have to deal with any of that. I can just move on. And that's what this is all about. Conflict resolution is not about winning arguments. It's about the power that you gain from being able to take control of your emotions in this situation and know which hill to die on, which hill to move forward, progress upward, and just to be able to master yourself in all of this. But here's the pitfall. Screw this up and you're toast. Unresolved conflict festers and it's bad. It turns into resentment, which we've talked about, plenty of content on the resentment. Resentment is a slow poison. It'll not only rot your marriage, your career, your soul. I've seen it in my own experience as someone who was very resentful, has been very resentful. That was one of the biggest parts of my work in rehab and going through the 12-step program is step 4, where I write the inventory, and then step 5, when I let all of that go. It changed my life big time. But that resentment, it's like every time you have a resentment, unresolved conflict, you're carrying this backpack and you're putting this rock and every single time you're putting more and more rocks into it. And before you know it, 5 years, 10 years down the road, that backpack is so heavy, it's weighed you down. You're nothing. The example that was used for me too is like, imagine a glass coffee table or a coffee table with a glass top, and you have the little pea gravel, and every time you have a resentment, every time you're hanging on to something, every day you progress hanging on to that, you put one more little pebble on there. Well, I mean, 5, 6, 10, 100, 500 of those little pebbles, not a big deal. But if you carry that on long enough and you keep putting them on, that's going to end up shattering. It's going to collapse. And that's what resentment does. But people who, I've seen too many people, my family included, myself, I was this way, but there's too many people who would rather die miserable than to just say, I was wrong. Don't be that guy. Okay. Period. So the upside to all of this, resolved conflict builds trust. A 2014 study showed that teams who fight well, openly and honestly, outperform the nice teams by 20%. Friction sharpens the blade. I'm going to say it again. Friction sharpens the blade. You can still be nice and deal with conflict resolution, but you have to accept the fact that you will have conflict. If you avoid it for the rest of your life and you just try and be the people pleaser who's just nice to everybody, well, you're going to be sorely disappointed, and you're going to build that resentment, and it's going to eventually eat you alive, right? Or you could just learn to have conflict resolution, and you could be 10 times more effective, okay? You grow. That's the reality of this. Facing conflict forces you to confront your weaknesses. It's like psychological weightlifting. Painful, but you come out of it stronger. Then the downside to all of this, chronic conflict doubles your risk of depression. Per a 2020 meta-analysis, your brain can't handle endless wars. It'll break eventually, right? Unresolved fights make you dumber. That's another key point in this. Stress literally kills memory and focus. So did you ever, you get in this argument, you ever forget your point mid-argument? It's just outrageously embarrassing, but that's your brain waving a white flag. You can only handle so much stress, right? Like we talked about at the beginning of this. When you get into a fight, when you get into an argument, you're starting to increase that cortisol, right? And your body is stressing out so much. That's why when you get into a verbal argument even, and it's a knockdown, drag out verbal argument, you're exhausted by the end of it. It's that cortisol has been spiking the whole time, and your body eventually gets to the point where you may have a heart attack, you may have a stroke, there are a lot of things that come from spiked cortisol, right? But to focus on the long game, and this is important, this is an important takeaway in all of this. If you can get to a point where you master this, you're thriving, I promise. Life's a series of conflicts, and the better that you handle them, the higher you climb. The guy who avoids conflict is not noble. He's a coward, and cowards do not win, period. All right, so that's it. That's all I have for you, folks. Conflict resolution isn't optional, it's survival. You're going to fight with people until the day you die. So you might as well get good at it, period. Face the chaos, wield the tools, and stop pretending that you're above the fray. You're not. None of us are. Next time you're ready to explode or hide, just remember, name it, listen, own it, negotiate, or walk away. That's the path to victory, period. And as always, thank you all for tuning in to Sober Psychology. If you found any of this helpful, found any of it interesting, share it, send it, thumbs up it, comment it, whatever you want to do. But regardless, keep your head up, keep your heart open, go resolve some conflict.